undermine, that's this lady over here. She's my root guru, my root teacher. Somewhere she once said in Satsang that if she felt any differently about any one person, that would ruin everything. In other words, what she was saying was that if she had a feeling of less love or less compassion or less care for any one person, that would mean that it would create a situation where people couldn't benefit as much, where everyone couldn't benefit. When you do spiritual practice like this, then eventually the feelings of compassion and concern, the desire to work for the well-being of people in whatever way you do, and a feeling of devotion toward people and everything becomes universalized. You don't feel less of that for one person and more of that for another. It doesn't mean that you don't have different relationships with people. I have very, very different relationships with different people. However, I have to say, and this is kind of astounding, actually, I'm not Ma, I never hope to be in Ma's condition. I'm not even particularly realized. I have some realization, but, not astounding. I'm not flying across Congress Street or anything. But I actually do feel the same about everybody. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I find it amazing because it means that you all could feel that also. There is an aspect of me that feels exactly the same about everybody, whether you practice 5 minutes a day or 10 hours a day, whether you like me or you hate me, whether you think these teachings are great or you think they're dumb, whether you have a commitment or whether you don't have a commitment, whether you're a nasty son of a bitch or whether you're really kind to everybody, whether you commit a crime or whether you're a saint, whether you're a junkie or a drunk or whether you're a teetotaler. I have to say, honestly, that when I look into my heart of hearts, I don't feel differently about anybody. And whatever condition they're in, I feel the same. I've been in a number of spiritual communities, and I've seen carrots dangled in front of people by teachers. I've seen teachers try to magnetize students by setting up things to compete for the favor of the teacher, number one, the approval of the teacher. Special transmissions, initiations, special time or special notice from the teacher. Inner circles, one teacher I had once even established something called the inner circle. It was long after I'd gone. I left that teacher long before he did that, but when I heard about it, I just was flabbergasted. I mean, the guy had no self-irony. And I have always been allergic to anything like that. It's manipulative. It's beside the point. It doesn't help anybody. And it perpetuates karmic fixation. There's nothing to compete for. Nothing. And yet, we live in a highly competitive culture. So what I've noticed, let me just preface this by saying, just since day one of Jayakula, I have been completely available to any student. Anyone can come to my office hours. People who aren't practicing, people only practicing 10 minutes a day, can come and tell me all about their lives and ask for advice, and that's been true since day one. I've lived with students in all kinds of conditions. I'm living with One of the people in our house right now is not an initiated student. She isn't even particularly committed to this tradition or me. But she's living in my house with me. This is part of how I want to be, right? This is an expression of me, that I'm doing this, that there's so few bars. There's really no hoop to jump through. But despite that, we live in this incredibly competitive culture. And you all have karmas that are just chugging along, that say, I want to compete, give me something to compete for. One thing I noticed long ago was that people would treat initiation as a prize to be won, even though it wasn't. People would think, well, I've done X, Y, Z steps, so my next natural step in my spiritual career path is to become initiated. And, people would show up in my office hours and say, I'd like to be initiated. And I'd say, why? And they go, I think it's time. I've taken this teaching and that teaching, and I've been around for a couple of years, and I just think it's time for me to be initiated. This is an aspect of our competitive society, right? You've got a little ladder of things, Jayakula ladder, and you've decided what order you should progress in, and initiation is on there. I've also noticed that a couple of people who came from other traditions to Jayakula, where there were very charismatic, strong male teachers who did make students jump through hoops and who did allow students to compete and for their attention, or try to seduce them into giving them attention and being in some sort of inner group. I have noticed amongst a couple of students that when they get here and there isn't anything to compete for, they freak out. Right? They're convinced that there's some mystical, magical inner circle that they're not getting into, and that they're being rejected from. They have a love-hate relationship with it, right? They think it's unfair, but yet they want to be in it. Right? Even one student long ago who I loved to death, I still love her to this day, and we're quite good, quite close. Even though she was never interested in being initiated, never considered me to be her primary teacher, wasn't really sure if this was her tradition, she still wanted to be in the inner circle. Right? She was still convinced there was one, and that she wasn't in it, and it was unfair. So, this idea that there is something to compete for is a pattern that people bring in. And I have never met any U.S. person, any person from the United States who did not have this pattern, including myself. I mean, I've just done more work on it over years. But this is like the American karma, is competitiveness. Right? And believe me, if there's nothing to compete for, you will make something up. Right? Because until that little engine of competition chugs out, it's going to keep running, and it's going to look for an object of desire to compete for. But that being said, there's a natural way that in spiritual communities people find their place. Like I said, as far as I'm concerned, and I think I know myself well enough, basically, bottom line, I abhor that kind of organization in spiritual communities, and I always have. And I've worked very hard to make sure Jayakula doesn't repeat those things. However, there's also a natural order to any group of people, or a spiritual community among them. There are people here, in this very room, for whom this tradition, this community, and me as a teacher are beyond question the most important thing in their lives. That is their natural desire, and that creates a natural place a natural way that those people are more involved in some way or another and have a different kind of connection to the teacher. I don't love those people any more than I love the most, drifty drifter among us. But those people are just going to be more involved in the life of the community. There's just no way that's not going to be true, because they want to be. Period. Right. There's some people here who are very involved in the community, who do a lot of practice or a good amount of practice, and who, for whom this might not be the most central thing in their lives. They just are doing it, and it's valuable to them, and they find their own place. And then there's other people who just like to come to satsang, and it's just kind of a cool, supportive thing to do, and they like kirtan, or they like the tea, I don't know. They're looking for dates, who knows? But whatever reason they're here, they find their place. And what is it all based on? It's the D word.
Desire.
Desire, yes. This spiritual community is organized around people's desire. It's about what you want. There are no requirements until you get initiated. There are no requirements unless there's some specific, teaching or something that has some requirement. But there are generally no requirements. You set your own requirements based on your desire. And if you sign up for something that has commitments, that's because you desire it, hopefully. Now, this is a self-organizing situation, to use a word from contemporary social theory. It's self-organizing, and in order to be a responsible person and a mature person, which I always encourage, you have to recognize that everything that you, at whatever position you take up in the community, it's because of your desire. If you desire a lot, there's a lot here. If you desire a little, that's fine. Now, there's another trick that happens, which is some people don't want that to be the case, right? They'd rather be told what to do. They'd rather be directed and given a lot of structure to help them to find meaning in their lives. But this isn't that kind of tradition. This tradition is based on your desire, what you want. The stronger your desire is, the more you get, right? The more you show up, the more I show up. It's a natural process. Right? So it's very, very rarely, this talk was occasioned by someone who has consistently felt there was an in-group that she wasn't invited to. And I think it's a very important topic for spiritual communities, because they're so often organized that way. And we should be aware. We should be very aware of that if we run into that situation. But this is not that situation. And I do my best. As I said, I'm not terribly enlightened, but I do my best to show everybody my love for them and my compassion and my concern for their well-being. But I can't force anyone to feel that. I can't force anyone to receive that or recognize it. Right? It's a two-way street, right? And we're all in unique conditions, and sometimes people can feel things and sometimes they can't. Or I'm just not the right person for them. That's fine too. But we're all just humans doing our best here, but also recognizing that this is self-driven, self-organizing. Right? And whatever you desire is fine. Right? It's fine with me. Of course I like having people who desire a lot around me, because I desire a lot. And it's not because it validates anything for me, or it's not even because I think it's important. I don't think it's important. I just think doing spiritual practice is natural, and it happens, and it's the play of the divine. And there's no we don't need to put glowy pink lights around it. You know why I like having people around who feel the same way I do about practice? Because it keeps me company. It keeps me company, and it helps me to give everything that I have to give. I can only give everything I have to give to the people who desire very, very deeply. Right? Because I can't give anything to people who don't want it. That would be unskillful and uncompassionate. It just doesn't work that way. So if I have people around me who desire deeply, then I feel accompanied in my own path. And also then I can also just give more. And giving more is really what's fulfilling to me. But I don't think those people are any more important than anybody else, right? I'm happy they're here, but if they weren't here, I would figure it out.